My notion of sustainability, because I grew up in a context where you need to think about resources very carefully to begin with. So my notion has always been like that. Actually, it is not nothing that, hey, people are talking about sustainability, so I have to reconsider that in a project. So even if you go back to projects early on, I've been thinking about, that's why the question of materiality comes into picture. What kind of material will be right material to use, but also will age beautifully, that it will last longer.
In a world increasingly facing the challenges of climate change, with the Building Green podcast, we will dive deep into the intersection of architecture, design, urbanism, and environmental responsibility. I'm Ladina Schöpf, your host. I've been an architect and building site manager for the past 10 years. During my studies at ETH in Switzerland, as well as in my working environment, I've had many touchpoints with sustainability, like many of you, I guess. I've also learned to question what I've been told, which is why I decided to go deeper into the topic and uncover what sustainability actually means. My mission is to highlight the transformative power of sustainable architecture, not just as a practice, but as a catalyst for broader societal change. Subscribe for more of our content and enjoy the show. Today on Building Green, I'm thrilled to welcome Satyendra Pakhalé. He's an innovative designer whose remarkable work goes beyond traditional design disciplines. So Satyendra, you were born in India and you're now based in Amsterdam. Your journey from the prestigious Indian Institute of Technology in Bombay to founding Satyendra Pakhalé Associates has been one of innovation and cross-disciplinary exploration. Your expertise in blending technology with craftsmanship and design philosophy has led to collaborations with global brands and institutions, establishing your reputation for sustainable and forward-thinking solutions. As an advocate of design that harmonizes functionality with poetic significance, your contributions are recognized worldwide, with your pieces featured in museums such as the Victoria and Albert Museum and Centre Pompidou. In our conversation today, I look forward to delving into your vision for a design that not only enhances human experiences, but also advocates for our planet's sustainability. Satyendra, it's an honor that you're here to share your insights and inspirations with me and my audience. So could you share the pivotal moments in your journey that led you to where you are today in the world of design?
Wow. Yeah. Thank you, Ladina. Thanks for invitation, and it's a pleasure to speak with you. Well, you mean like all the journey so far, or what? What?
Sure.
Where shall I start? Yeah. Well, I mean, well, design as such, or creation in a broad sense, because design in that sense, I never see it in a very categorized or one compartment or the other, but in a very broad spectrum of creation, like in a built world, it's just the curiosity led to this. I would say I've been fortunate to stumble upon the profession very early on, to discover. And you have to remember, this is the era when I was growing up, there was no internet, so, and internet, we have it on our desk in mid 90s, late 90s. So this is before that time. And so obviously to find information itself is a challenge. And the part of India I come from, it's right in the center, so then, and even till today, actually, it is not as developed, I would say, as not accessible as the rest of the places are, so finding information was quite almost like a coincidence, like a beautiful coincidence that I get to know. I found one book once. It was a book about design by George Nelson, the American architect. I found it in a school library. I read, and I just felt this is what I want to pursue. So that was really a very, very amazing, let's say, discovery, just out of my curiosity. And I've been always creating, making things, and I have to tell you, because we're going to talk a lot about the word sustainability, which says everything and nothing at the same time today, because it's been somehow overused word, sometimes even misused, if I can say, so these things, actually, for me, they sound sometimes too a bit banal, but I'll get to that later. But before that,
I'm looking forward.
Yes, before that, actually, the thing is, it was just the curiosity. I've been making things, drawing things, those things, and my parents saw that as aptitude in me and was sent to kind of write schools. That time there were technical schools where you teach, already at the high school, doing all what you do in European context, what you call gymnasium, where you do all the mathematics and languages and all that. But besides that, you also do how to make things, with all basic materials and technical drawings and on those things. So it was a really beautiful combination, somewhat unique actually, not in every school, but in that special school that leads you to pursue whatever, either architecture, design, engineering, all kind of professions. So that's how I gone, and one lead to another, I landed up finally into the Industrial Design Center. That was quite international actually at that time, and that's before the internet time. And there was a wonderful occasion on which I got admitted to the school at the same year, was the celebration of this design school, which was based on the historic Ulm school. The historic Ulm school, which is founded by the great Swiss architect and designer from your city, Max Bill, probably
Mm-hmm.
and he was one of the founding dean of this school actually. Ulm, the HFK Ulm, in Ulm, which was just founded just after the war. And one of my professors studied there, and he was then came back to India and started design school in this Indian Institute of Technology. That's where I studied actually. And later, and at that year was very interesting and important because that year was the 20th celebration of this institution, and a lot of people from Europe, from Japan, from America, Australia came to visit. So that was my really design introduction in a very international context. And that's how. And then I won the international first prize of the Art Center College, which was in Switzerland. So I have a long link with Switzerland, and it was the American school that existed in the French part of Switzerland, close to Vevey. And I was the first prize winner. That led me to study product design there. And after that, that was wonderful experience actually. And it was again the school where everybody who came to teach was a practicing designer, so they were in the profession. So it was very interesting to engage with lots of legends in industry and as such, like people who came there. And then after that, I worked a little bit with frog design with Hartmut Esslinger, the man who really defined the Apple design, what we know today. With a lot of few people know the inside story. And because frog
Can
design
you
founded.
tell us the inside story?
Yeah, the thing is, frog design was the design company that time in late 80s, early 90s, where young Steve Jobs selected them to be the main design company to design their early product. So the Macintosh, the classic, this year in 2024 becomes 40 years old, was designed by them.
Like
And
the egg.
no, the egg came much later.
Ah.
This is really 84, the first product Apple
The
had.
small one.
The
Yeah.
small one, the very cute one, the little small one, which had
Yeah.
34 KB on their floppy disk, that time. Yeah. So that one was designed. And so the design language of that, if you really understand, is the monitor and everything is all in one hardware. And all you have outside is a keyboard and a mouse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so today's all the Macs actually have exactly desktop has exactly same thing. Everything is in one. You only keyboard and mouse is outside, and that's it. So that conception of the Apple at that time was very very strong actually. So it defines the DNA of Apple already there. So I had a great privilege to spend time, and that time Hartmut Esslinger was like the master grandmaster. He has done all those things, and he was very friendly towards me. I was a young guy, and I could ask him why the keyboard is like that, and I could argue with him on a lot of things. And also, then they designed the second computer with them, is called Next Computer, and that was
Mm-hmm.
another computer that was computer on which the internet was made actually, at CERN, So the next computer was again a beautiful piece of work. Actually, that was the first black computer ever made, in a black color that there was never been. So that was these are the things I get to see inside, how they were made, how they were conceived, and so forth. And so that was a
So
wonderful experience.
interesting.
Yeah. And then I was invited to join a unique team at the Philips Design by Stefano Mazzano, who was an Italian architect who was heading Philips Design at that time in mid 90s, and he was like the first person from design to be part of the board of directors. So he was part of top management. So there was a big influence, and a big leadership, visionary leadership in terms of doing design and implementing it on a very broad scale, And there I get to do very innovative projects like the Pangea car collaboration with Renault. There are many other things. Their vision on Move. There were objects what we are now talking through like a mobile devices. They were conceived already then, though the technology was not there. The solid state memory was not there. The video cameras, what we have now, we are speaking with, didn't exist, and all these things were there that time. So that was the wonderful possibility. But I did that. All these were intense years. I did that 3.5 years exactly, and then I was so curious to explore different things, from technology to very age-old crafts, and that's how I moved to Amsterdam, set up my practice, and started. That was 98. That exactly 25 years ago. Yeah.
That's super cool. And what was the
Yeah.
first product you started with?
I almost took a U-turn, because you see, I will talk to you about that as well, because I did a lot of technology, automotive technology, a lot of state of art, and I could have gone on that line, but I always felt there is a need to explore the age-old techniques, like the lost wax casting process. There are many other materials that one need to explore. So I set out to explore this very unique technique, which I was exploring, and I discovered one community in the center part of India where they do the casting in a very unique way, actually, as a very unique, refined object making, actually, and that I explored for a long time, and that is where I started with, and then one led to another. I engage with materials like ceramic, then I engage different materials. I really took on each material and explore it in terms of the language, in terms of possibilities, in terms of its own, in terms of long lasting impact of those materiality on the making itself. So those were the early projects, and that led to projects with industry, and that led to other curiosities, and then afterwards I landed up doing architecture. So this is like a progressive one after another thing, actually, like organic growth.
So let's say you started with the technology, went back to craftsmanship, and then put it all together.
Exactly, you can say that, more or less. Yeah.
So looking back over your inspiring career, how have the evolving demands of sustainability, or I'm interested in knowing what you meant before by saying that the word of sustainability is somehow a bit loose or misused. So how have the evolving demands of sustainability shaped your approach to design and innovation over the years?
No, that's an interesting thing, and that's where I have to bring you back to the other point I was talking about, and that is, you see, I did not grow up in a consumption culture, so my growing up didn't happen in a consumer society as such. Yeah, my way and understanding of life has happened where every resource you have to use carefully, because there's no other resources otherwise, and there's no market that, even, I mean, just to give you a simple uh, recall of a childhood, is like, it's not that your parents or your mom is taking you to the store and buying a toy, because uh, you go and find a piece of wood, you have idea, you go to a maker, a carpenter, you make a toy, you make a top, you make those kind of things. So in that sense of conceiving an idea and getting it made and using it is been part of my childhood, you see. So that on one hand is that. The other thing is I seen, and later when I got the chance to travel around the world, be it Africa, be it in Finland, or be it in let's say other parts of Europe, if you really look back when before the Second World War, that's not a long time in a arc of a history of humanity. Almost every place people had unique way of doing things, and in Switzerland you have many ways of doing things, or using local material in the context of that, whatever you find in a vicinity. And the beautiful example comes to my mind is from Pfalz, like the one from Zumthor, Peter Zumthor, So these
Mm-hmm.
kind of examples where the materiality is used from the context, this is seen everywhere on the planet Earth, Nothing,
Mm-hmm.
everybody uses the context, understand the geography, and does that. What happens, and we need to understand this in a context of the arc of a history, that what happens after the Second World War, where in the 50s and the 60s, the consumer society is almost invented, if I can say. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the pushing of consumption and throwaway culture is kind of cultivated and reinforced in a society as almost like a notion of a progress or notion of a modernity, which seen from today's perspective is absurd. You know, so you can
Mm-hmm.
even research a little bit and find out that uh, Scientific America kind of magazine has a cover page where a housewife, a lady, just taking these throwaway plastic plates and say, "Hey, I don't need to do dishes anymore," and she's throwing away. Nobody thought where it's going to go, and these errors are done by everywhere. I was talking to an industrialist in Dietikon, which is not so far from Zurich, once, and he said, "Hey, everywhere was the same. Even in the pharmaceutical companies used to throw their let's say chemically treated water into the Rhine. This was happening all the way up to 80s, actually. So this the throwaway culture gone so beyond, like nobody thought about it. There is a notion of a twisted notion, I call it, of a progress, or twisted notion of modernity. In my view, that's not the real modernity. And that created this kind of a behavior and that's everywhere. There's no place you can say it's not done. And there are a lot of places it's continue to happen. So when talking about sustainability, actually, at least we are talking about it now, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing. But my notion of sustainability, because I grew up in a context where you need to think about resources very carefully to begin with. So my notion has always been like that, actually. It is not nothing that, hey, people are talking about sustainability, so I have to reconsider that in a project. So even if you go back to projects early on, I've been thinking about, that's why the question of materiality comes into picture. What kind of material will be right material to use, but also will age beautifully, that it will last longer. you know so all these concerns were in the early exercises, actually, whether how do you use the materials, how do you make it, what kind of processes you use, and so forth. So the question of sustainability does not come because there is a conversation about what you call the climate change. It's not. It's the other way around, because the concern has always been there. So I've been talking about this very early on. That may sound very different now, or maybe pretentious to some people who don't know me. That hey, this is. But if you look back, it has been going on for a long time, to an extent that I remember in early 2000, I was talking about this, and I was giving a talk at the Future Design Days in Stockholm, and I spoke about these issues very, very strongly. And then later the same year, actually, I recall the Design Academy in Eindhoven, the very well-known design school. The director, Lia Delcourt, she was asking me to think about uh, conceiving a program for Master of Design and heading the master program, actually, which at that point of time, I was not so much inclined to go to teach or be affiliated with the academics that time. I was very much focused on a practice. But then after reflecting and she convincing me and few other people, I took that responsibility and I ran the Master of Design for Humanity and Sustainable Living. This was a program I ran from 2006 till 2010. And now the same type of program which evolved further is called social design, so the context of this I've been talking a lot earlier, and that also reflects in my in the projects as well, which I will talk in a bit. But so it's not a new notion to me, and if you really dig down and find out, I'm talking about in every culture you could go, you will find very sustained way of living. All the practices, all the ways of living are very much rooted in their practice, and that we call either cultural expression, the food they eat, cultivate. It was all over. No place is exception. And these are beautiful ways of doing things. Unfortunately, we trash those things. You see, now I am not the guy or not the person who's romantic about the past. That's not what I'm saying here. Let's not confuse the issue here. Yeah. I'm saying is there are certain right way of doing things which we should have cultivated and even pushed further, which we did not. Instead, we invented so-called consumerism. And now, after doing 70 or 80 years of that, we suddenly realize, hey, that's not the right way. So we're talking about sustainability. In fact, everything should be sustainable, including human relationships. If it's not, we collapse. As simple as that. I can't go more basic than that. So, and every human civilization, every human culture, in a very profound way, is a sustainable if you really look at their practices everywhere. You cannot just say, otherwise, people would not survive. People would not survive in Finland. They really found a way after 1,000 years of, let's say, trying out doing things. They found a way how to sustain, and then there are festivals for according to the seasons, and then there are, let's say, special food which is prepared for that season, and so on and so forth, that you find across the world, so it always been there. So it's not something new in a way. So now what we did is that we trashed it. Yeah. Now I repeat myself that I'm not saying that we have to glorify the past. That's not I'm about. I say we have to learn from the past but go forward. That's all I would say. Yeah.
A few of you might know that I recently opened my own architecture studio, and I just started with a podcast. I'm very excited to build a platform where I connect with inspiring people to learn along the way and share these learnings with you. So if any little thing has inspired you, or if you learned anything new, I'd appreciate if you could rate the show or share my content on social media, Spotify or YouTube or wherever you listen to it. And if you think there are any touch points between you and me, I'd be super happy to connect with you. Feel free to reach out on any platform. So you're saying that your cultural or your diverse background is what influenced actually your sustainable design ethos, because you didn't grow up with the consumerism that maybe me, a few generation or a generation later in another in Europe grew up with.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't want to say that as a unique thing. It was a unique thing. It was the only possibility. You understand, It was not that I'm saying I could relate to that, and also thanks to the people around me when I grew up, parents and relatives, that awareness was there. That hey, you have to be you can't just throw whatever things away. You have to be resourceful. So that awareness was there. And I think I would say that is not unique to any specific place. That awareness one could see across the world where the consumption culture didn't happen, Yeah.
And so you then became a teacher. And what did you differently? Were you the first one that ran the program of design and sustainability?
Yeah, that was the founding department of Master of Design for Humanity and Sustainable Living. Yeah. Yeah.
And what did you do different with the students than what was?
It's not really different. It's really we did many different kind of projects, and the question of sustainability one could talk or many levels. The obvious first thing, and though it is obvious, and there's but still a lot of work to be done, and in all fields, including architecture to objects to design to everything, is the materiality, like how we use material and resources. That's the, I would say, just so primary. We are not gone past that yet, unfortunately. That's so primary. I mean, that has to be, that we shouldn't exploit and all those things. I mean, it has been said 1,000 times. And if you really want to know, there was, I think, a person with a Finnish or Hungarian background. I don't know exactly. Victor Papanek. He wrote a beautiful book, Design for the Real World, many years ago in late 50s, early 60s. So he talks a lot about it. Buckminster Fuller talks about it as well. Using right kind of technologies and right kind of material and so on and so forth. That's the obvious step one could do, but it's that's really, and most of the cultures I spoke about around the world, how people use their resources with that kind of a respect and so forth. You see it in Japan, you see all over the world. Actually, there's no place I can't think doesn't have that genuine consideration for nature. But it was not just that. If you really talk about sustainability, we need to take a panoramic view on entire things, what our man-made culture is all about. So we dealt into healthcare, so we dealt into the cultural context. We did a lot of different kind of projects, to projects about identity, because all these issues eventually rooted in a context of human dignity. Yeah, and what I mean by human dignity, because in a consumer industrial exploitative condition, one or the other place is exploited, either resources, whether they come from here or somewhere else. And why they are exploited? Because there's not same consideration for humanity. Like if we consider human rights in Europe this way, you don't apply the same rules if you're doing in a colonized place. So what comes down here, in that context, is the question of human dignity. And we worked on that. We worked on identity of a people. We worked on project across different kind of geographies, Finland to Turkey to Africa, in Brazil as well. So there were really many different takes on that. It was not one take on a sustainability in that sense. And one
That's
project
it.
I can conclude was done called a cold chain, cold chain. That was how we could uh, deploy and distribute, let's say, the life-saving vaccinations across the world in a different terrains, actually. That was one of the other projects we carried out, actually. And then I further developed that during the pandemic in 2020. And that's on our website as well, actually, the modular vaccine carrier. Yeah.
Can you explain that to the audience, to the ones that don't
Well,
know the project?
well, yeah, this is a very interesting situation that we have, let's say, outside Europe, Canada, and in some part of US. There's hardly a systemic healthcare system exist that really reaches across the urban as well as rural context. And if you take the extreme difficult terrains like in some part of Southeast Asia, South America, where literally people cannot be reached so easily. So the World Health Organization has a program called Cold Chain, where there's literally a container with the vaccination, which all the children have to get while growing up, or when there's a pandemic like we just gone through, that people need to get the vaccination. In that case, how do you take the vaccinations which are sitting in Geneva, because the United World Health Organization is there, or their distribution center is in Copenhagen, how that goes to all these remote places, and it's really the situation is quite sad at this point of time, how they are distributed. They have this very basic container which is then shipped with the flight to the local, whatever the storage there. From there it's taken either on the jeeps, or then it goes on a camel or on a donkey or on a bicycle or on the head of the people. It's really crazy how it goes all the way to the village, and often it does not reach there. So this was an attempt to create a modular system by which it's a container that has all the vaccinations that can retain at certain temperature, but at the same time you can properly stack them, that great number of let's say vaccination can be stored in a compact way without damaging in a small space. Then it has a form that you can carry as a backpack, you can carry on a shoulder. And even worst case, which I don't really want to profess and propagate, but it happens in our world that some people carry it on the head, which is not very healthy for a human being to carry things on the head. But again, because we are in that situation, it also has a possibility that it can be carried on the head as well. And then it can go around the world, and it has a tracking, so you can really see it is going to the place where it is deployed to go, it is supposed to plan to go, so all those features are in there actually.
Super interesting.
Yeah.
Very nice. And back to the pandemic, since you mentioned it before,
Yeah.
I read in your essay, Future is Now,
Yeah.
you draw the fascinating parallels between historical pandemics and their
Yeah.
influence on modern architecture, like highlighting the shift towards integrating work and life spaces in urban design.
Yeah.
So, considering this perspective, how do you envision sustainable architecture and design evolving to address current global challenges?
Yeah. I think there are a lot of really fascinating possibilities when one gets to looking at the current pandemic, and how we could learn from it and try to really do something about our built environment. So it can go from urban planning all the way to object actually, and one can get benefits from it, in a way. In some places you see early signs, people are already doing that, and the obvious thing is running between the suburb to going to the work and spending hours which is conditioned in many metropolitan cities, unfortunately, is not the right way. That's where the classic idea of a home and work and all of that. So it's not also to glorify in that sense, but somewhat, let's say, middle way would be the another conception called 15 minute city, what they call. I even would call it 5 minute city, to be honest, because that's the condition. And luckily we have it here in Amsterdam. You also have it in Zurich as well, that you
Yeah,
can almost have all your stuff done in that 5 minutes of commute, and you can get almost everything done for your daily life and don't kill your time for that. So that's the obvious thing, I would say, which is the rest of the world has to catch up and do something about it, obviously. That is there on a question of let's say understanding of on an architectural built environment. Let's say there is still, I mean, the notion using of a daylight, using the natural ventilation. I think these are very profound ideas, which are not new ideas by any means. And every culture has dealt with them in a better ways. But again, I can go back to our consumption society, then suddenly the glass towers are created, and then you have to cool it in the summer and heat it up in the winter. This nonsensical progress, has been adopted in almost every big city around the world. And you got the glass towers. Now you go to India, and the temperature is fantastic outside, and you go inside, it's like 20-25. You go inside, you're freezing, in a normal day. And in the summer, it's 40 some or 50 degrees, and inside you have to cool down the whole tower, and if you go outside you can get a sunstroke. So this is like absurd modernity actually. So, and this has been going on. So at that level, I think the using of, let's say, natural ventilation, as well as I would say using a daylight, and there's a lot of possibilities of using a daylight actually, is I think creates a beautiful architecture, because that is the kind of poetics we need to really bring in, which is always, because the resources are used so carelessly that you can just create an enclosed surface, and then you heat up when you want, you can put the light where you want, and then it's like just useless nonsense. So the moment you use a daylight, the moment you use a natural ventilation, it makes you think in a different way. And when it makes you think in a different way, it creates also beautiful spaces, beautiful language actually. And that is what I'm fascinated by. It creates a language which is not the obvious stereotypical language, where the things are, again, looks banal almost everywhere in the world actually. They almost, if I would throw some slides of different places including Zurich, and show them like which country it is from, nobody will know where it is from, because they look the same almost. So all these things are missed opportunities, uh, uh, and these are still yet to be done. So what we are missing is that poetics in architecture. That is where there's a beautiful light one could bring in. The light changes as the day changes, the light changes as the season changes. You can have a beautiful vegetation, which is different in different places actually, which could be part of architecture as well, to enhance not only the environmental condition, to get better oxygen or quality of air and all that, but also make it a very beautiful gesture in terms of almost poetics, because in autumn it will have different colors, in a spring it will have different colors, and in summer will be different. So I mean, all these things we are missing. I mean, that's ridiculous. And we call ourselves so-called advance and progress and whatnot. I mean, that is just gone. And there's so much to do on that. So this sustainability issue is not just cut and dry about either saving resources or that. We are missing on our quality and beauty and poetics of life. Not having that. Yeah.
I really like that idea of going a step back or a step forward into connecting more with the nature that surrounds us. So living or building with what's around us rather than with the newest technology, which means glass towers everywhere.
Exactly. And let's not forget, I mean, if you really dig down ancient societies and look at the very, very even archaeological findings in urban conditions which were there 2000 5,000 years ago, you find already multi-storied buildings. So it is not a question about towers. There could be towers, but the towers could be made in a different ways. And towers don't necessarily have to be always vertical. They could be horizontal as well. That's what I mean. Yeah.
Are you talking about the line?
No, I'm not talking only about the line, but that's a good one. But there are many other examples, Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the point you talked about is like from the pandemic, going from there, I spoke about the urban environment to architecture. I go to the object level now. Yeah. And that's where the pandemic, because you made a link to the future is now, the essay I was mentioning all these issues there. Now, I want to ask you a question. Like, you think about the radiator. Where does the radiator go in the house?
Underneath the window.
Yes. Or what else?
On the floor or on the ceiling.
Or the ceiling. Yeah, the floor is the new thing. That is the floor heating, relatively speaking.
Yes.
But under the window,
and the
you
ceiling
said
is
that's
even newer. Yeah.
Yeah. But that's bit problematic because the hot air goes up. That's a basic physics. So putting it in the ceiling is going to heat up the next floor, not to you. So that's a bit of problematic. But next to window is a good question, a good answer you gave, and and it has its roots in a previous pandemic, almost a century ago. And what they found out that to have, let's say, warm air and a fresh air, so they put it just under the window. So when you open the window, the cold air is coming, but it's somehow the warm air is getting pushed in as well, and the air gets heated up, sort of. So that was the consideration why we got the radius on the wall itself. But now, this year, exactly 20 years ago, we launched a product which was called add-on radiator, which is all this consideration, what we call sustainability, all of that has been in it actually. Now, today, unlike 100 years ago, we have architecture, we have double glazed walls, windows in almost every building. That's really a norm. You cannot build just with single glass. Even sometimes they are three times glaze, triple glaze. But double glaze is a norm. So we don't have a condition like 100 years where the air, just the cold air is coming in. We have quite concealed and sealed windows these days because the technology is much better, right? So heating up the infrastructure is not the context. So I wanted to create a radiator where you really need a warmth next to you. So why can't the radiator be part of your living environment? That's how the add-on radiator was born actually. That it can be integrated with the architecture. The water comes from the ceiling, hot water, which is the most efficient, ecological, and less energy intense, means cost effective way to heat with the hot water, and this hydraulic thing and goes into the ceiling. So seems like a simple idea. It took a lot of effort to make it. It was 4 years of work to engineer it, produce it, and it became an industrial product. And that's also a product not only aesthetic element that it's nice to look at, which almost everybody likes it, but the main consideration I had in that project is to not to waste energy. That's how it started, because the more air surface it has, more it will heat the surrounding space. If you mount it on the wall, it heats up the wall first. Up to 40 to 60% heat goes in the wall first before you start heating the space where you are, because you're not sitting next to the radiator or something, you're sitting in the space. So all these considerations were back of my mind to conceive that idea. That, and then they still call it the only innovative radiator in the market, because it is a radiator where air passes through it, and you can integrate in architecture. Now 20 years it's in the market, but it's still difficult for most of the architects and planners to really see that, hey, this can be added and this could be used in an interior like architectural element. And it is used, and in Switzerland it is used in one very beautiful site, and it's used in some other places, but there's still very few people who got it, really the sense of it, because the notion of something stuck on the wall is so strong that even this radiator gives you a possibility that you can put on the wall if you want to, but you can really remove it from the wall and put it between the ceiling and the floor. And this is a very exciting possibility, and this has all its roots actually in that thinking, as well as the understanding of the previous pandemic, as well as our pandemic, what happened. So I give you these
Yeah.
three possibilities: on urban, on architecture, as well as on object level, on a product level.
Yeah, yeah. So did I understand it right? It's like the idea behind this it is to use it as well as a room separator, where if you have like a huge living room that you want to separate into two areas, you can use it there, and it works kind of like an old musharabi. I don't know how you spell it. But like a nice element where also like the light gets filtered through, and a little bit the noise, and it's like an accent in the room.
Exactly. And at the same time, it's really a radiator. It works as a radiator. It is not, because the hot water goes through it, and because it's in the space, it heats up your space. And so that was my main beginning. And all the other features you said, that it could become a room divider, it can break the light, it can break the sound, all of that were additional things that happen with it. But my main consideration was how to conceive energy and how to create an object which can be integral part of architecture. That's where it started.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. So I wanted to ask you if you could highlight a specific project or design of yours that has significantly contributed to making our living spaces more sustainable. Would that be it?
I don't know. I mean, I
The
would
one?
think about this as the only possibility comes to my mind right away. Yeah. That, because heating is such a significant, let's say, energy intense act we have in a living, especially in the winters we have, on the planet, where it's necessary to heat up the interior spaces. In that sense, the early consideration on this project has always been that very unique idea, that how can we conserve the energy, how can we not heat up the infrastructure, that's the wall, but how our space heated up, and feel
Very
comfortable.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So digital technologies reshaping design. How have digital advancements like 3D printing transformed the sustainable aspects of your work, especially in material selection and production techniques?
Yeah, I mean, look, every technology gives a possibility, and of course, 3D we've been using since the beginning, and the possibilities of, let's say, there are many possibilities one could not think otherwise, because it's become easier, faster, more effective to calculate and understand how much surfaces, what kind of things we have. But really, sometimes we also, as a culture, have a tendency to glorify certain things, and 3D printing, you know some sense it's a good thing because you can have certain result, get certain thing, but it's still in a very early stage of its development, let's not forget. So what we see 3D printing now is still very, very early phase. The metal printing is just coming just right now. It's still in a very basic form. You can't do bigger pieces and so forth. And the sand printing is coming, so the natural material like a sand can be printed and so forth and all that. But the classic 3D printing is a great technology, but it's also limiting as a beginning to begin with. So we have to still wait till it gets refined, gets further, and we use it, of course, to experiment it and understand it. But I think we need to understand these things and make them much more refined, that they become more articulate. So I would not glorify them for the sake of just being new. That doesn't suit my mindset at all. I think we have a lot more possibility to explore there. Like you see in architecture, some very basic 3D printing. People have already built the whole house with the 3D printed, whatever, cement or other kind of things. But I think they are still very primal in my sense of understanding. Primal means basic. Yeah, they still need to be advanced. In many ways. Yeah.
And do you think the fact that many people or more people have through 3D printing access to create stuff or build houses, does that create more consumerism maybe?
Not necessarily. Look, I mean, everything has its possibility. I think, first of all, I don't want to sound like it's not democratic to think like that, but I want to say something very profoundly primary. Uh, just because more people do does not mean, if take example of a camera. Yeah. Now in today's context, before you need to have a professional camera. Now in everybody's pocket got a camera, right? Like the iPhone or any smartphone you take, you have a good quality camera, fairly good quality video. That does not make everybody a great filmmaker or a photographer, does that?
Right.
Yeah. Do you see where I'm
Yeah.
going with this? Yeah.
Yeah.
So if the technology is in hand, now pencil, everybody can have a pencil, right? That does not make them a great person to conceive idea or a draw or a write a great poetry. You see what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah.
I am completely for accessibility to everybody. But let's make no mistake that just because it's accessible to everybody, that means it's going to be developed faster, or greater poetics are going to come out of it. I think that is not the right expectation. Definitely everything should be accessible to everybody. But would that lead to a possibility where we want to know? I think people who, like us, who are engaged with the creating, engaged with making, are critical, not fascinated for the sake of fascination or just for the newness, but really apply to them and try to use in a different way, push the borders. Those are the people who are going to make it something different. you know and who are those people? They could be anybody. So it should have accessibility, of course, and with that accessibility, some kids sitting somewhere can think about some other ways of doing it and so forth. So that's how the progress would happen and should happen. So I don't know. I mean, we can't say just because accessing everybody will change it, or not giving access will not change. I mean, we need people who to engage it more, let's say, with greater curiosity, I would say.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. And I mean, accessibility also comes with choice. So everybody has to choose one thing they are gonna pursue, whether it is writing with a pencil or 3D printing.
Yeah. And I think I would not glorify either of those. So I don't want to glorify pencil, and I don't want to glorify 3D printing as well. They're equally important and equally nonsensical or sensical. What you make out of it is more interesting. It's not the tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that actually points towards my next question. Like, sustainability often involves blending old and new. And I want to ask you, how do you balance traditional craftsmanship with modern sustainable practices, especially in the diverse material choices and again in the production techniques?
Yeah. No, Ladina, here I have to mention one thing. Tradition for the sake of tradition doesn't mean anything to me at all, because every tradition, if you really ask that question, was an innovation at one point of time. It didn't exist all the time. You need to ask that question.
Yes.
So So from that perspective, something one has to follow just because the tradition, that doesn't suit me. I'm the first one to break that rule. But at the same time, new for the sake of new also doesn't mean anything, because it's just the fascination. And you see that with the technology, like it's one after another after another. But what is really most important with this whole, let's say, even a dialogue between so-called modernity and tradition, I think more important thing is making meaning. What makes meaning, what makes poetics, what makes beautiful, what makes possibility, that enhances our sensorial quality. I think that is more important. And how to do that, how do you combine that, how do you synthesize that, that leads to the possibilities what we could do. So I really don't want to get into this, what is this and what is that, the let's say the confusion and the dynamics between, oh, this is this, this is that. I said loud and clear, tradition for tradition doesn't mean nothing. I think what we need to do is to able to see the world beyond these limits, because these are also binaries somehow created by people. You know, they are created by, like sometimes there's a conversation that the traditional craftsmanship is opposite of technology. But if you ask me the best craft example, I will give you Boeing. If you go to the Boeing factory, everything is assembled with hand. What is that? Craft, right? That's my way of looking at the craft. Then you take a weaving basket done in some place in, I don't know, Namibia. It is nothing but a fractal geometry. That's a mathematics. You cannot say that just because it's done by hand. In fact, one should give more let's say, possibilities and respect to the object which is conceived completely by a person and has that accurate mathematics in it. So this very archaic and old-fashioned ideas of what is tradition and what is modernity, I think we need to question them first. And then once you question them, these binaries which are made, which are kind of confusing and unnecessarily, like I gave you two examples. Now nobody's mind will come like, hey, Boeing is a handmade object. It is a handmade object. You see? So
but
that is
it's
the way that
actually
we...
funny. It's sorry to interrupt you. It's actually funny because when I started studying, or the first times I went to a building site, I'm an architect. So the first times I went to a building site, I remember going home and telling my mom that I was like completely fascinating, that actually every building in the world is handmade. Like, in fact, it's people putting stones together with their hands and putting the window in by hand. So
yeah,
that was so fascinating to me.
It is totally handmade thing, and it's a one-off as well.
Yeah.
There's no other thing exists. It just made once. So all the mistakes of learnings are in there. All the possibilities are in there.
Yeah.
That's really true what you said. Yeah.
A huge thank you for listening. Make sure you subscribe to the show wherever you listen to the podcast to support me and so you don't miss an episode. And while you're there, I'd also be so grateful if you could rate and review us. If you have any guest suggestions or any feedback, you can find me on the socials at Ladina Schöpf. Thanks.